Honey, we need to chat.
Welcome back to another episode of Honey, We Need to Chat, a relationship podcast all about
communication.
when communication dies, bad things happen.
Good job, baby.
So don't
You
die.
took over the intro. It was great in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm just rearranging our plants behind us because I realized they're all behind Blair, and that's not fair.
Oh, natural.
Welcome to our Chit-Chat episode. We're very excited to chit-chat with you guys today. It feels like a long time since we've recorded for some reason.
Yeah, we skipped last week. Yeah. We've been in this really annoying season of a week where it's like we feel miserable.
Unwell.
We feel like, but it's not like really sick, just really run down.
Yeah.
And then you feel, you know, when those moments you like, your body starts to ache, like you're getting sick, but it doesn't go past that stage.
Yeah.
That's what it's been like.
Yeah.
So we skipped
especially
last
for
week.
you. It's been a strange week for health, even mental health for me, but we're doing better-ish. I'm feeling better.
You've had a journey as well. So it was good to have last week as a break from recording.
Yeah, but
it's good to be
necessary,
back.
And that's why we do it in the way we do it, so that when we do need breaks, it works out. Not too bad.
But now we got some catch up to do to get in front again.
But you guys won't know.
Nah.
It'll just seem totally normal from your end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how are you out of 10, babe?
I am a 9.
Mm-hmm.
I would be higher.
You'd be higher? Wow.
I would be higher. Anyway, so we've got this big fundraiser event for my work coming up this weekend for Father's Day. And it's just, I'm someone that really needs structure, right? So when I'm working, I need to have it in my calendar. This is when I'm working on this thing. This is when I'm working on this thing. And I do really well in that space. When I'm all organized and I've got my processes and procedures all working out, I work really, really well. But for this fundraiser event, it's very reactionary work. Like I've got to respond to this email or this phone call or this question, or, you know, we're doing a lot of interviews and stuff at the moment for the news and newspaper and whatever else. And so you've got to call, like they call you or they'll message you and you've got to be ready. Yeah. Like it's like you drop everything and you've got to take that call, or you've got to go into the studio or whatever else. So it's very reactionary at the moment, which is, it is what it is. It's fine. But I would be higher if it was post-event.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's good. I'm probably an 8, I would say. Yeah. Enjoying some of the work that I've been able to do this week and that we've done together. We've done some planning, which has been good. And hopefully will result in trickling down to you guys, the effects of that.
Deal with us. Bear with us for a moment, guys.
Amy's having a particular moment. Things just don't feel like they're sitting right.
Every time you move your stuff, it moves my stuff.
Because you're holding that with your foot.
Yeah, because I'm keeping it stable.
Anyway,
sacrifice.
We're here. We've got an exciting episode, I feel, today. There's a few listener write-ins, which is really cool, that we're going to chat through once I can get my mic sorted. And then we're actually going to do some of the coaching stuff that I've been working on. So since our last episode, we referred to me going down to finish my coaching certificates, which I have finished now, which I'm really excited about. It's been a really fun process.
You've completed it.
I've completed.
How many courses have you started? This isn't a diss.
No. I've started 2 bachelors of psychology twice.
Yeah.
I started a diploma of social media marketing.
Yeah.
And I started a Bible college diploma or something. I have no idea what that was, because I was doing an internship.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
And this is the first thing you finished?
This is the first thing. Yeah. Is that right?
Either way, it's a big accomplishment.
It is a big accomplishment.
It's awesome.
And I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah, good job.
And I think I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, actually one of the people I met in coaching, and we were just like, gosh, uni is such a funny process because people just jump into uni, and some people are so sure what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And they do it and they study it. They get their HECS debt or whatever they end up taking on for study, and then they work in it and they love it. But so many people pay money like I did to just like try and figure out what they were doing early on and actually have no idea. And I'm 33 years old and I'm finally feeling a little bit more stable in terms of what I actually enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Back when I was 18, trying to decide what to do, I was all over the place. I had no idea. That's a lot of money to set aside for something that Like, it's all part of the journey. So I'm not regretting it or anything, but it's just a fascinating pressure that the world puts on people.
So what age did I go to college? I went to college at like, I was 30.
2017.
I was 30 when
Were you?
Yeah, when we had our oldest.
There you go.
So I would have been 30 when I went to college.
Yeah. And you did really well. So there you go.
And I had a very different attitude at that point than I would have if I went straight out of high school.
100%.
Yeah.
And if you know what you want to do, awesome. I just really, and I think the world is actually shifting in this way.
Yeah.
I don't think that the pressure is as high as it probably was when we were younger, especially in other countries, it's even higher. So Australia is probably a little bit ahead or different in that way anyway. But yeah, that's just a little reflection for you. That's all I've got to say about that.
Cool.
But all that to say, there will be some coaching stuff in this episode.
This is so bad because now you've moved your stuff. My stuff's moved. I want to move my thing and it's moving your thing. So I know it's going to move your thing.
My mouth is. That's what's annoying me. And when I edit, I can hear it when I go like this and it just annoys me. Anyway, we'll get there, guys. All right. So we're just going to dive right into our listener write-ins. There's two. There's a really short one that's kind of more of like a concept we're going to just quickly discuss. And then there's a longer story from one of our listeners, which is a really good conversation. And they kind of actually, interestingly, are connected, almost like it was planned that way.
Oh, hickory dickory.
All right. So listener submission 1 was a question on our survey. And the person says, how can wives learn to be more respectful when they feel their husband is slacking? How can husbands learn to love their wives in ways that don't come naturally to them? And is it possible for husbands to know what their wives want without asking them? I feel like this is such a universal tension, not necessarily always exactly the way this person's written it in, but I feel like every couple navigates these interesting differences and these tensions to some extent, or they're in relationship with people that have. So really good question. Tough question. How can wives learn to be more respectful when they feel their husband is slacking?
I think the question is, how is she being disrespectful? Like, which we don't obviously know. And it depends on what she means by respectful. So for me, I feel like when someone's struggling slacking in a relationship, it requires intentionality. I don't think you just brush it off and let it go. If it's something that's worth bringing up, you bring it up, and then the journey is on how do I bring it up and when do I bring it up and so forth.
Yeah.
But, I think there's some missing information there.
Yeah. I think probably the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is when someone's slacking, like you've said, it's not just something you push away. And I feel like there is a little bit of a culture sometimes to just push it away, either out of bitterness or out of like feeling like you have to, your obligation or whatever, culturally, traditionally, whatever might be going on for you, pushing it away, pretending like it's not happening. And then trying to figure out how you're respectful to someone when that's how you've approached it is going to be really tough, because you're allowing this person to impact you and potentially even hurt you, depending on what the area of slacking is. And then you're like, I have to be respectful to them. And after time, if you're pushing away somebody's hurt, you are going to lose respect for them, because that just builds to contempt. Like that's how contempt builds. So I think the conversation is super important. Respectful in that everyone goes through waves of times where they struggle with things. And like this last couple weeks, I've been really struggling, and you took a lot of the load in terms of keeping the house above water. And that was really helpful for me, because I just felt like I couldn't. And then because you were able to do that, I was then able to come back up when I was able to and take that on as well, and kind of keep walking with that with you. And so, and we've had times where it's been the other way around, like with your burnout, for example, I took most of the load when you just couldn't. So I think understanding when someone's slacking, it's not, I don't think it's normally just because they've chosen to slack and they just think that's amazing and that's fine and excusable. I think it either comes from they're really struggling with something that maybe they don't even know that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
Or even they don't know any different. They've never seen a better example, which I think is a really common story with men, unfortunately, having grown up with dads that they just haven't seen a different example in the house. And so never excusing the behavior, but understanding what's happening for them is really important for you to be able to respectfully support somebody in that space.
I've been in a lot of news articles, as I mentioned earlier, or news interviews in the last couple of weeks. And a big question that keeps coming up is like, what's different for men these days? Like, what different challenges do they have? And I was sort of reflecting on that, and I could be wrong, but from my perspective, it's like I don't actually see that we have any different challenges. I feel like men these days are just being more aware of another option from those challenges. So, for example, if we go down to work-life balance, right? So tying this into our write-in here, this guy's like slacking, right, at home, but what's happening for him at work? And for a lot of dads, again, I can't speak for women's side of this, but the working parent is that work-life balance, right? Like, how do you give 100% at work because you want to do a good job, you want to be a good worker, you want to succeed, but then how do you do well at home? And that's been something that's been very, very hard because home is also the safe space. So that's probably, from my perspective, the place where slacking is more likely to happen because at work, you've got this pressure of deadlines, of this, of that, of this, of that. Homes, and this is why you see a different side of people in the home. You know what I mean? You see a different side of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? You see the different sides of people at home because home is actually safer.
Should be.
It should be safer, yeah. It would be surprising if this guy doesn't know that he's slacking and that he wants it to be different.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going for.
Yeah.
Is, the awareness for a lot of guys is a lot less, but the knowing on how to do that thing different is the journey. And sometimes it's really hard, right? This is my little ramble. It's hard because these things should be so easy. They should be so obvious. They should be just done, right? We go through these things where again, just going back to my burnout, there was things in there where I'm like, I can't do the bare minimum. Like I was so struggling to do the bare minimum. For anyone outside not knowing my situation, I would have been just slacking. If you weren't aware of my situation, you would be just like, he is just slacking. Like he's just, your view of me would be very, very different. But you knew how much wrestle I had. It didn't mean it was any easier for you. Through my seasons of difficulty has taught me to repeat what you've been repeating through this whole podcast, have an attitude of curiosity. Yeah. What else is going on for this guy rather than just not showing up, not rocking up, like not stepping up to the plate,
Yeah. I think 100% exploring what's happening, being really clear in what you're experiencing in that too. So the respectful side of things is not avoiding it. It's not avoiding it. It's not pretending that isn't happening because that's never going to fix anything.
No.
If you genuinely think that your partner is slacking and it's harming you or hurting your family culture or whatever's going on, it needs to be communicated.
Yeah.
Because it will never, ever resolve itself. It's just not going to. And even if it does look like it's getting better, your lack of communication is going to become a problem in that space. So that doesn't mean that one person's perspective of it is right either, because the partner that thinks that the other person's slacking could have extremely high expectations that are unrealistic. But the conversation needs to happen for that to have an understanding. And if you don't understand what's going on for them, if you haven't asked the questions, you haven't had that curiosity, they may not understand what's going on for them. It's just going to end up staying that way. Try and force yourself to be more respectful in a situation that there's no work being done in resolving it is going to end up in burning yourself out and end up in resentment and contempt. And I don't see that playing out well in any example that comes to mind. And so I think the respect comes in honoring that people struggle, in honoring that people have reasons that go on, in honoring that people sometimes don't bring their best to the table. Sometimes the home is the safe space, and not being all like about it in your approach, having that respectful tone and being like, I really want to understand what's going on for you, or I really need to express what's happening for me, but being loving and respectful in that, because when we also talk about this all the time, it's your responsibility until you can communicate it to the other person. Then it's your joint responsibility / their responsibility. And so if you haven't communicated that respectfully and lovingly, then that's going to cause an issue. If you can't also hold them to the things that they're now responsible for gently and lovingly and with as much patience as possible, that's also going to be an issue. And so I think just being aware of the two kinds of sides of that coin. I think a huge one that comes to mind straight away is not making your problems everybody else's problems. I think especially if you haven't communicated it properly to your partner yet, one big way that partners struggle with respecting their partner is by complaining or by having bitterness in their heart, or having a bitterness in how they communicate about their partner, or having a bitterness about how they tell their story. Like, that's a common issue. I don't think the fact that it's a common issue means it's an okay issue. I should think that's one of the most undermining parts of relationships, is that bitterness, as we talked about with the 4 horsemen. That's one of the horsemen of contempt, the horsemen of relationships. That's a bad red flag in relationships. So making sure you're honoring them in how you're communicating, or who you're communicating to, or all of that sort of stuff, is probably the most important part to this. And then working together on a plan and how it's going to not stay that way. The second part of her question was, how can husbands learn to love their wives in ways that don't come naturally to them?
Through the conversation and through continual working on it. You know what I mean? Like, this was my situation. And yours too. I tried to speak my love language to you. You tried to speak your love language to me. And there's a disconnect. We just weren't filling our tanks, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a once-off conversation of like, that's not my love language. This is. It wasn't that was a part of it, but it was that it still is, even to today, like 10 years on. We're 10-year anniversary next year, and we're still continually working on, what do you need? Like, where are you at? How's your love tank? All this sort of stuff. It's a continual conversation. It's not a once-off conversation.
Yeah.
It's a commitment to that process and the regularity behind it.
I feel like there's traditionally been a bit of a culture as well with men, where that vulnerable love-giving side, it has struggled a bit more. So I think, generally speaking, women tend to not find it as hard to be in that kind of like vulnerable way of showing love to someone. Whereas I think there could be a bigger tendency on a man's side to struggle to be okay in that vulnerable space.
Yeah.
Not always,
No.
just to be clear. And I don't think that's because they're being horrible. Again, I think
it's shifting.
I think 100%. I think it's shifting too. But I think that being comfortable with maybe looking a little bit vulnerable, and being comfortable, and this is across the board, being comfortable with admitting that you don't know how to love the person the most, or admitting that you want to work on something, is going to always help bring that closer together than if you come at it and you're like, I can't show vulnerability. I need to either have it together or not have it at all, or I need to only do the hardcore like things that I feel okay doing, and not the things that are like more vulnerable and a bit more sensitive that she may be needing me to do. Like, I think all of those kinds of attitudes can be blockages, or can help you in terms of learning how to love your partner the most.
Vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you can be vulnerable to your partner, especially, the strength that will come out of your relationship from that vulnerability will be huge.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to see that difference. So if you're actually, listening to this and you're struggling, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. You will become a better couple, a better person if you can be vulnerable.
Vulnerability builds strength. Strength, in quotation marks, the appearance of strength, actually builds vulnerability, because you are more vulnerable if you cannot break through into that vulnerability space. You're more vulnerable to collapsing, because you're not allowing that muscle to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the last one is it possible for a husband to know what their wives want without them asking? And this is a huge question.
Oh man, straight off the bat, no. It's just no. Like, if there's assumptions, and I hear this a lot, actually. I hear it a lot for guys and girls too, but mostly from women, is like, I just want you to know what I need. It's not going to happen. We are not mind readers. And you and I have even had this conversation recently, and it's not that you come out and you say, I need you to know what I want. It's more about, I'm trying, like, you've had this low season, and I'm really trying to figure out what's my role right now. Like, what do I do right now? I don't know how I can best support you. And it was... And we had a lot of different conversations, because then I try and deal with it the way that I naturally deal with things, and it's not the way that you naturally receive things. So that was a whole other issue as well. No is the answer.
Yeah, it is really hard and I honestly am so fascinated by this, because I do feel like, generally speaking, women are raised or something, whatever it is that makes this be the case, especially by the time you become a mum, to have your brain constantly ticking about what everyone else needs. And so you're constantly, it's a whole mental load thing again, right? You're constantly balancing what everyone else needs. And then there does seem to be this culture, if you talk stereotypes, where a man needs to be almost like told what to do, whereas the woman's like, yeah, but I'm the one coming up with everything that needs to be done, and now I have to tell you what to do. Why can't your brain work that way? In the same way mine is. Why can't you learn to be like, what does everyone need? And it's not fair on either side, to be honest. It's a really tough dynamic. And I think everybody has different personality traits that lend themselves to different skills or strengths just naturally. So there will be some women that don't notice a single thing about what other people need. That's just their personality or their whatever is going on in how their brain works. And there'll be some men who are really, really attuned to what people need because that's how their brain has always worked. It's what they've grown up with, whatever it is that's built that. But it's a tough dynamic to navigate because it is exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. But I still think there's an element where you learn stuff still too, though.
Oh, 100%.
You know, it's not as simple as like guys don't think about the other person. Only women do that. Like it's not as simple and as black and white as that. Because there's elements too where you're still learning. For how to support me, right? So, for example, if I'm stressed or if I'm trying to process something, your natural response is to keep asking, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" This is a mild example,
I know. Yeah.
And that's not helpful, right? And you still do that because that's how you naturally do things. So there's an element where you're still learning and I still have to tell you what I need.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, there is a big part of that with mental load. So there is a big part where you have to help me understand and think through stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't know what she's asking here. I feel like these are two different things. What she's asking here in relations to the slackingness and everything else like that is kind of different to what you're referring to with the mental load stuff.
I don't think so. Slacking mental load would be
more
totally
my point of I've got this whole scenario in my head, which is where I'm coming from, right? So she's like, all right, he's slacking. I'm struggling with this, and this, but she doesn't voice anything with what she's struggling with. But she's got this expectation that he would know that she's actually struggling. If nothing gets verbalized, for a lot of guys, it's like, well, we're all good, right? So that's just it's I say it's back on her because unless you verbalize or vocalize the struggle. Isn't it fair to assume that we're all good?
It is fair, but I would probably argue that she would notice more quickly if he wasn't good, if the kids weren't good. I think there's a natural ability. I'm not even going to say natural because, I have no idea where it comes from. I think it's so layered. But there's this different skill set where, especially once you become a mum, you just kind of pick up a lot more of that stuff. And there's absolutely still things that need to be learned. But I think I haven't seen many examples of it play out where that's not how it starts out, where the woman in the picture seems to kind of know what needs to be done more quickly. Again, maybe how they've been raised and what they've seen. And the man doesn't. And so I don't think it's fair to expect anyone to know, anyone ever at all, to know what you need until you're able to communicate it. Unfortunately, what I do see regularly, what I do hear regularly is this, like, I've had to tell him so many times, or I have had to, like, how does he not see that I'm doing, or how, like, these logical things of, like, it would not take much for a brain to be like, she's been up with the baby all night. Can I help her sleep in? Or she's been doing this all week. Maybe I can offer to do this nappy change. That doesn't take much, but there does seem to be a bit of a culture, again, generally speaking, where it's like, why do I need to step him through how to do that? Why do I need to tell him the baby needs a nappy change? Can you get the baby a nappy change?
Yeah. And this is the interesting season that we're in too, right? Because this culture is changing. And because what I feel like is that we're in this like middle ground of gender norms back in the day, gender roles, back in the day, down to now dads are being more present, dads are being more available, dads are being more emotionally available, all that sort of stuff. There's this change, but we're kind of stuck in the change. So people are exactly. So a lot of guys are learning that difference, but they still haven't seen that difference. So again, like what you mentioned before, for a lot of guys, we copy what we've seen, and what we've seen isn't great. but it's changing. We just the guys haven't seen it, so they don't know what it actually looks like.
And I think there would be a drive for most guys to want to be way more engaged in that space than maybe they feel that they are, or maybe their partner feels that they are. What I think is the best way to come about this is, will you ever have them know exactly what you want? Hopefully there's some stuff that you won't have to keep repeating. Hopefully, there should be. Like, there's no excuse for that long term. There should be a time where down the track, your partner does know what you need in this space because you've strengthened together that muscle. Like we've been navigating with this, like, when we're in stress, how do we support each other thing? That's been a 10-year conversation, and we still have things that come up all the time. But I think in 10 years' time, we're going to be further down the track where I'm not saying this is what I need as much, and you're not saying, no, I don't need that right now. Like, that's hopefully the idea is you're working together. Everyone is going to bring to that conversation their own skill set. And unfortunately, it's not going to match up. And that's going to be, if you looked at every skill set that the two of you bring, all of your different skill sets, you'll see that there'll be weaknesses and strengths across the board. If you're just looking at one and it's like this mental load thing or this like innate knowing of things, then it probably looks like, this is totally out of balance. You need to have a grace for each other. You're bringing different skill sets. You're bringing different focuses. That's what makes partnerships work. Because if you were exactly the same, it wouldn't be as effective. You're different people. So no, you probably won't ever be able to expect them to just know what you want. Same thing in return. You're probably not always just going to know what they want. Can you expect and hold them to a standard where they're learning what you want through that gentle, respectful communication? 100%. And you should. And you should keep coming back to that conversation, because if you don't, it's just that muscle's not going to get stronger. And that's what we're having to do all the time. Sometimes it's lighter hearted. Sometimes it's really heavy, but it's just a constant coming back to that. And I think what we'll get into with the coaching later is knowing what you want and working towards that. If you're sitting here like, he doesn't know what I want, he's never going to know what I want, blah, 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 you're never going to get to where you want in your relationship. It's never going to get there. If you're sitting there like, he doesn't really read what I want, I've had to repeat things too many times, I want my relationship 5 years down the track to be stronger in this space. What can I do now to make steps that way? And how can I bring him in on this in a way that he understands it, that talks to him in a gentle way? That's what's gonna end up getting you to that place.
Sit down as a couple, date night at home, and ask the question: where do we want our relationship in 5 years? Write it down.
Literally.
Write it down. And for guys, listening to this as well, we've spoken a little bit more about gender stuff in this episode. What I want to encourage you and challenge you with is have that attitude of curiosity for yourself. Do some self-reflection. If I am slacking, why? Why is that the case? Why do I think that I'm not seeing what my partner needs? And just commit to that journey. Put things in place to continually grow in those areas that you're wanting to grow in. Do it after you have that, where do we want to be in 5 years? Get some more clarity around where you're at, where you want to be, what's the difference, and how can I work on that?
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, next story follows right on from this conversation, which is awesome.
Hey guys, just taking a little bit of a break right now. I wanted to share something with you so you don't miss out on. We actually have 10 spots left on our Patreon for this tier. We're about to up our tier, and which we are really, really excited about. We got 10 spots left, which is less than a cup of coffee a month. So head on over. You get bonus episodes. You get to join in on conversations over on Patreon. You get to input into the podcast. You get to bring topics. You get to get ideas, all that sort of stuff. Head over to Patreon, sign up,
be one of the OG chatters.
Be an OG chatter.
Upgrades.
10 more people.
Never do it again. See you.
Cheers, guys.
This is from one of our chatters. He says, first of all, you guys are amazing. And I've had something to take away and work on from every one of your podcasts. That's very lovely to hear. Yeah, really.
I haven't actually heard this story.
Oh, yeah. So a bit of background. I'm 29, male. My wife is 27, female. We've been together since we were very young. It's been around 11 years that we've been together and married for 3. I've done a lot of work growing as a husband for the last year or so, and my wife is more than happy with that progress. However, how I was earlier in the marriage has caused my wife to hold a grudge. Before we were married, I lived with my parents, and they weren't the greatest examples of a balanced and healthy marriage. My mom takes care of most things, the house, cleaning, cooking, and works a full-time job. I hardly cleaned because my mum would pick up the slack. My dad mostly sleeps when he's not working and does odd jobs around the house when he needs to. I brought some of those expectations with me and thought nothing of it, as I thought this was the normal way. My idea of clean is very different to my wife's. I've since made a ton of changes and worked towards getting better standards and understanding of what a husband really is, thanks to you guys and my wife, of course. Just a few examples of my not so great behavior. Abysmal cleaning efforts and blaming her for having too high standards. Not spending enough time with her. My idea was that I was spending time with her and just being around was good enough. Not looking after my own health. I gained at least 30 kilos during this time. All of this set off an argument that almost ended our relationship with her staying at her parents' house for a couple of days.
Oh, wow.
Every time I make a mistake or a hiccup, like not cleaning something on accident or taking a nap, eating something bad, my wife says her feelings from the past are brought up and it causes an argument back and forth. I'm really struggling because I've been pouring my heart and soul into becoming a better man and husband recently, and for a good year at least to this point. Cleaning every day to a better standard that she's been happy with. I lost 20 kilos and got my health in order.
Nice.
I set up days to spend time with her, have been fairly good at sticking to them. The problem I'm having is that every time I make a mistake or a slip, it's assumed I'm going back to my old ways, and it's exhausting. How do I show my wife that I'm a changed man and that I don't ever plan on going back to how I was? Is it just time? I feel like I've been patient for a long time, but I can't keep getting held to my past. She's done things that have hurt me in the past, and I've moved past them and never brought them up because the past is the past.
Man, that was really well written, man. And I love there's so much self-reflection in that.
Yeah,
and there's so much evaluation and there's so much intentionality. And I absolutely love that. Where do we start?
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
I think we have had things that we've navigated that were really hurtful, and then we've navigated the working on it, coming out of it part. And then, but also the residual like triggers that it brings up. And it is a process. I definitely relate to this in different ways. It is a process, and it's a process on both sides. It's not a process on one person's side to fix all of that. Even when one person has done something that's hurt the person, I could find myself. So one of the examples is early in our marriage, you were struggling quite a lot with pornography. And that was a really challenging thing for both of us for different reasons. And then you put things in place a lot to work on that. And we put things in place to work on that. But there was still quite a process that I had to go through, which was my responsibility to go through, where I would be very triggered by it, or if there was a hint of something like that, it would throw me big time, or I'd just get super anxious. Like I'd be really like micromanaging because I was so worried that it was happening again. And you also had to be putting that consistent work into working on that stuff. And so I think when you navigate something like this, it's fair, and it's fair that it's going to be a process. It's fair that there's going to be residual things. That's what mistakes are, right? We've got consequences to mistakes. We've got consequences to hurt, and they naturally play out, and that's what makes them difficult. But you also have to be able to have that constant communication and ownership of each person's side of that processing.
One question I was going to ask is, he's doing a lot of things. He's being very intentional with himself, but is he doing that solo? Do you know what I mean? Like, so that's the thing is, like, I can do all the changing, and I'll see all the work that I'm doing. I know how intentional I'm being, but unless I actually share that with you, you have a glimpse, a tiny glimpse. And so there's no real reassuring you of the things that I'm putting in place, because you don't know the things I'm putting in place. You're seeing just some nice changes, but how is this going to last? Like, so what's that? And that's where it's like, for you and I, for the things that I've wrestled with, through the things that you've wrestled with, we still always have these different triggers that pop up. Yes, the past is the past. You can't hold on to the past, but the past seems to always affect the future. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, being naive to that or wishing a different way is like, all right, because part of the journey, part of the growth wasn't just a matter of me putting in things in place for me to improve as a husband. It was also to help you with your healing process of the hurt that caused. Yeah. So that's where it's like, if I'm just doing things to be a better person or a better husband, but the hurt that I caused is still there. Yeah. So how are we actually growing in that? Growth of trust needs to be one thing, healing for you, and then healing of our marriage in those areas, because otherwise those triggers are going to keep popping up. Yeah. So is that solo? For you and I, it's never been, Blair, go get better, be better, do better. It's been like, all right, how do we do that? And that's through our constant communication and conversation.
I have a really clear picture of this, like in my head. It's like if someone accidentally stabbed you with their fork and they made a little indent.
That's very different.
Anyway, they hurt you, right? They physically hurt you for whatever reason, intentionally or unintentionally. They physically hurt you. There's a wound there, and that wound needs to heal. That takes time. It also takes care. So that's why when we're talking about intentionality, you can push that wound away and that's never going to heal in a proper way. That's going to make a scar that's hurtful, or it's going to have deeper damage that it might look fine on the surface, but it's not. Or you can fester in that wound and you can keep adding dirt and grime to that wound and then like keep feeding it and it's going to become an infection. So when you've been hurt by somebody, yes, they have hurt you, but you are still responsible in the ownership of caring for yourself afterwards. They are not because of them. It's not even because of them. It's because of you. Like you deserve to heal yourself in a way that's going to end up with a healthy result.
Yeah.
And this kind of playing off your example, if I just was hurt by you and I saw that you harmed me and we talked about it and I was like, that hurt me. And then I've got this wound and I'm healing this wound. And you are just silently sitting there like, yeah, I hurt you. And that's all I see. I've probably got questions like, why did you hurt me? Did you mean to hurt me? Like, do you think about doing it again? Just to be clear, this is an example. This is not if someone actually physically harmed you.
I have not stabbed Amy with a fork.
No. This is just a picture, not if this is actually happening to you. That's a totally different situation.
Yeah.
But like trying to give an image to go with this. If you were silently there and we hadn't had that conversation, or even if you looked like remorseful, but I was like, and I had all these questions going on in my head and I just couldn't make myself ask you because I was like, oh, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to bring it up. That's not going to help either because then I'm dealing with my wound. I have no idea where you're at and my brain's going to run wild and it's going to tell me all the things that are going to happen. And every time you come near me, I might flinch. And then you're going to be like, why is she reacting like this? Or you might be like, it's totally fine. She's dealing with her wound. It's totally fine. She hasn't asked me anything. It's totally fine. I'm just going to go about my way. Or you might be stressing inside and being like, I got to put this in place. I can never do that again. I'm really scared. I'm going to be stressed about it again. I can never use that fork utensil again. Like you could be stressing, but keeping it straight. And I'm like, he's totally fine. Nothing's going on for him. That is why communication is so important through this stuff. Because we have no idea. We have no idea what's going on for that person. So I think coming right back to our chatters conversation, I'm so encouraged to hear the work that you've put in. That is huge.
That's massive, dude.
And the fact that you've recognized it, you've been able to communicate through that, you've actually changed it. That is huge. It's going to be a process. You're going to have times, just like every single person, where you don't meet the expectations that you have for yourself, or you have a stressful day and you just don't do what you wanted to get done. And that is normal. If you get down on yourself in that time and you're like, oh, you never do it, you're never going to get back up. Like that's really hard to get back up after. Instead of just being like, oh, that was a bad day. Tomorrow will be a new day. Flip side for your partner, she's been hurt. She's lost some trust. She may even have triggers from her past. I have no idea about when people act like this. So who knows what's playing into that for her? Maybe there's like this picture she's got of her parents or her experience that's like people never ever work on this stuff. And that she might be seeing you having worked on this and be encouraged by that. But then her brain, her mind, her triggers, whatever's going on for her could be just bringing her back to there. Having that conversation really clearly and saying, I'm trying really hard. I feel like you're still very concerned about me in this space, or I feel like I'm still not doing something to the level that you're happy with. Can you explain what's happening for you? I think is a really good place to start.
Our camera stopped. I love this. This write-in came in from a guy. I get so excited and pumped up when, I think this sort of vulnerability and this intentionality is not often seen by guys. And I love it when I do see it. And then the fact that you write into us, dude, is such an honor, actually, that you feel comfortable to share that with us. So thank you so much, man. I want to encourage you. I know it gets tiring when you have to keep reliving old things, but stick with it because it's so important. It's so worth it. And what you're doing is you're not just being husband, you're being a great husband.
Yeah.
You know, and that's your pursuit. It's not just being a husband, not just to tick a box. You actually want to be a great husband. You want a great relationship. And that takes effort, even when it's tiring. So just keep going on, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I would say just like have that attitude of curiosity, do what we're about to talk about in terms of this coaching stuff as well. And on a date night, sit down, have that intentional time set aside to talk about what's going on and to find a way that you can most be encouraged by each other, most be reassured by each other without feeling like you're being stuck in a place or you're not meeting expectations, whatever it might be. Wondering what's going on for her, explaining what's going on for you, all of that stuff's going to help. Awesome. Well, thank you for writing in and for listening. We're going to quickly chat about some coaching stuff that really reinforces the conversations we've had today. So in coaching, and we've spoken about this really briefly on the podcast before, there's this thing that we've said where what you focus on is what you get. And there's a whole reason for this. And so I just thought I would explain a little bit about the scientific reasoning for this. So in our brains, there is something called the RAS, which is the reticular activating system. And that is a system that basically is the filter for our brain for taking in the information around us. So it uses all the information gathered by our senses, takes in the information, and tells us the message that is reinforcing what we're needing the message to be. So that's what the RAS is. It decides what gets our attention because it filters information in. It also filters information out. So if it's got this little filter on it saying this is the information we're gathering, it will also push the information that's not applicable out. So a really, really good example of this is hearing your name in a busy room, a noisy room. You can usually hear someone from across, I can hear someone from across the room say, Amy. I'll be like, oh, Amy. There's so much noise going on. It's just my brain's like, you are Amy. They've said, Amy, what's that? When you become a parent, a crying baby. It's like, what? Crying baby? You wake up from sleep because you hear this tiny cry across the house kind of thing. So your brain has a filter on it. It's gathering information all the time. And that's what informs you in life. And so things like, we've talked about this example. You're looking for a car. You have this specific car that you're really passionate about and you just see it everywhere. You start to be like, everyone has this car. It's everywhere. Oh my gosh, look, there's another one of these cars. There's another one of these cars. It's not because all of a sudden that car is everywhere on the road. It's actually no different to what it's been every single time. It's because your brain is obsessed with this car. You can't stop thinking about this car you want. You can't stop thinking about the color that you want. And then so your brain's like, oh, they are really into this car. So I'm going to find every piece of evidence that this car is around, everything that I can relating to this car. And not only that, I'm also then going to dismiss every piece of evidence that's not about this car. So instead of just seeing your Fords that you're really interested in, you're seeing your Fords everywhere. We're also not going to see the Kias. We're not going to see don't ask me for another car name because I can't do it. We're not going to see those. We're kicking that information out. So that's what the RAS system does for us. It's located in the brain stem. So it's located at the bottom of your brain where your brain connects to the spinal cord. And it's like the switchboard of information that goes between the two. The other really important part of this is our brains do not take in negatives. So when we say, I don't want to think about pizza, all our brain thinks about is pizza. It doesn't actually hear that I do not want, or I'm not, or it doesn't hear that negative wording. It removes that piece of information and then focuses on the rest of it. So an example is that people use a lot when they're talking about this is if you say to your brain, don't think about an elephant, the only thing it does is think about an elephant. It doesn't hear the don't think about and then shuts it down. So we spend a lot of time as people being like, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be a bad mom. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be lazy. I don't want to be poor. All these things we're like, I don't want this. I don't want this. Our brain doesn't hear those things. And so it actually impacts it impacts the information that you're taking in, which then impacts how you live. Because as we've said, the RAS is what's gathering all the evidence around you that things are happening. So if you're saying to your brain over and over and over, I don't want to be poor, I don't want to be poor, I don't want to be poor, all it's hearing is, I want to be poor, I want to be poor, I want to be poor. And so then the brain's like, the RAS is like, oh, got to do a good job, got to do a really good job. And it's doing an amazing job. It's doing its job completely perfectly by gathering all the information that you pour and ignoring all the information that you're not. So instead of focusing on the money that you set aside in your savings, it'll be like, no, we don't need to tell Amy that. We need to focus on how she didn't have enough money to buy that bag that she really wanted. We're not going to focus on how she was able to buy her groceries this week. We're going to focus on how she isn't able to go to Thailand with her friends next year. We're not going to focus on the fact that she is paying every week for her rent, and she's paying for her mortgage, and she's, whatever it is that she's living in, the home that she's living in, because she can pay for that. We're going to focus on the fact that she can't afford to put herself into this beauty spa thing she wants to go to. And so instead of all the positives, it's only focusing on the I want to be poor part and telling you all the things that reinforce that. So then your brain's like, I am poor. You're like, I don't want to be poor. And then it's just only telling you things about the times when you've struggled with money. And that's all you're focusing on. And it starts to actually impact your outworkings in your life. So the reason that all of this is so important, and it's important across the board with so much stuff, is if you can start to shift what you are focusing on and shift the belief or the story or the focus that you're telling yourself to support what you want, you will see outcomes that are so much stronger, even if it's just an outcome in how you're holding yourself. So this is the other side of this, is you saying, I don't want to be poor, doesn't make you more poor. But what it does make you is mentally, you're in a worse place. Mentally, you're low. Mentally, you're unmotivated. Mentally, you're living in a place of like, I don't have enough. You might start to remove yourself. You might start to shut down that creativity. You might start to not perform as well at work. It does have actual impacts on your life. You focusing on, I have enough all the time, or like focusing on the positives and being like, I have enough to pay my mortgage this month. And being able to focus on that actually is like, it impacts your mentality around it. It impacts your physiology, which impacts your mood. It impacts how you present yourself in the world. It impacts how you interact with people around you. This is why it's important. So when we're looking at these stories we've talked about today, we've talked about, how can I best respect someone who's slacking? Talking about will my partner ever know what I want without me having to ask him? We're then talking about the second story where it's like, I've worked really hard to be a better partner, and my partner is only seeing the triggers of when I've messed up or something like that. All of these goals, you can start to put shifts in how you are approaching them mentally that will help result in a more uplifting result in the end. And there's a framework that we learned, which was the 5 principles of success. And one part of it really stood out to me. And this is what I want to focus on today, is knowing what you want, like being really clear on what you want. If you're sitting there in any area of life, but we're going to talk about relationships right now, and you're like, just feeling stuck, just feeling negative, just feeling lost, whatever, you're not feeling like you're getting momentum, and you know a lot of what you don't want, but you're struggling to know what you do want, and you're struggling to see results. One step in the right direction is getting super clear on what you want. And we've talked about this so many times. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Sitting down, either with yourself, if you're not in a place with your partner where you can communicate like this, or as a couple, even better, on an intentional date night, time set aside to connect, and getting so clear down to the detail, down to these made up pictures of what it will smell like and look like and feel like, what you want in 5 years' time in your relationship, what you want in 1 year time, what do you want in 1 month, and breaking it down so clearly and literally writing it down. What do you want? And allowing that to be what you're like focusing on. That is going to help your actual brain help you get to that place better. It's going to help you approach each other better. It's going to help you come up with a vision as a couple better. And that is so powerful.
So is this what you're doing with me in the
Yes. So I'm going to actually be working through some of this stuff with Blair in our Chatters episode, where I'm going to coach him, which they tell everyone in this course that I've done, do not coach your partner. But I'm about to do that. But it's lighthearted. But I just want to
take that.
We wanted to show you what it would look like kind of working through some of this stuff. And the reason we're doing this is like you can just float through life. You can just float through without being intentional and feel lost. And this is kind of how I've been feeling the last few weeks, just lost and low and not really sure. And that's okay, because life will be like that sometimes. But you also have things you can do to start to kind of take back some of that ownership of your life, take back some of that control of your life and your relationship, and be intentional and actually make steps forward. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to focus on this in the chatter episode. One last thing I want to leave you with, we talk about elite athletes, right? They do a lot of practice, a lot of practice. They do not sit there and look at the field ahead of them, the track ahead of them, whatever they're doing, and picture everything that could go wrong. They don't focus on the negatives. They don't sit there as they're preparing to do their massive challenge and sit there and think about, this could go wrong, so I'm not going to do that. This could go wrong, so I'm not going to do that. What they do is they actually visualize. They sit there and they visualize what it will look like, feel like, smell like, what it will be for them to succeed and kick their goal in what they're about to do. And that is how they achieve their things. If they were to go and do it and they're focusing on what not to do, the chances of them actually going down the path that they didn't want to do is more likely, because that's what their brain is focusing on. So that's what we're doing here. We want to be elite athletes in our relationships, and we want to be sitting there focusing on picturing, working towards what we want it to be, and becoming a team in that space, rather than what we're scared of it being, what we don't want it to be, what it isn't, and all of those negatives. End of TED Talk.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm keen to get into it.
Cool. Well, join us on the chatter episode if you want to see Blair learn a whole bunch about himself.
Learning.
We'll see how that goes. But it's been so good to chat to you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for these stories, listeners/chatters. We really appreciate your submissions. If you have a story, if you've got a question that you want to submit, we have a section on the website where you can do that. You can do it completely anonymously if you like. We won't even know who you are, and we'd love to chat about it on the podcast.
Honey, we need to chat at honeyweeneedtochat.com.
There we go.
Got it.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.